our panel started? Great. So I hope you had a chance to meet your neighbors. Maybe somebody from the other side of the border or from even beyond, since we have a lot of guests coming from around the world. So thank you for joining us for today's first plenary session, a forum that functions working across borders. So my name is Karen McGuire, and I work at the OECD, and I'm very excited to moderate this esteemed panel that covers a range of different issues, and all folks that have some experience here with the region in different ways. Again, just a huge thanks to the organizers and all of you also in the audience who are the champions working in the cross-border field helping to make this happen, because I know it's not an easy task. You have to do all sorts of development issues, and then you add an exponent of complexity. So we're really, you're the heroes here. The work of the OECD and the work on local development, the Local Development Forum, is really thinking about how do we make sure policies, as our Deputy Secretary General said, are adapted to local realities, and those adaptations are very, very important, and we really want to highlight where things are working and not working for folks on the ground. But we also heard from the video right at the beginning and from some of the speeches that it's also how the cross-border region is sort of a hub in a global network, and so this sort of local global link, I think, is really important for us to talk about, and we'll get into also the role of some of the infrastructure and helping to play that as well. Functional areas, we talk a forum that functions. When we talk about the cross-border, we also think, okay, well, what is the right form? What are the functions we're talking about? Is it commuting? Is it innovation collaboration? Is it managing a waterfront? So we're always thinking also in the work at the OECD about what is sort of the relevant scale for thinking about organizing different forms of policy interventions. So I think, just a reminder for today, we really want to get into a few different key issues here. How can this cross-border collaboration really create new economic opportunities, and not just for the core of sort of Malmö and Copenhagen, but also beyond into the other areas of the greater Copenhagen region that are maybe a little bit more rural. How can we really look at these issues of the labor market? We heard earlier about massive labor shortages, green and digital transitions. How can we help make sure people have the right skills and are matched to jobs? How can this cross-border collaboration help us get there? And also the important role of public and private partnerships. It's not all a public sector issue, a private sector issue. It's everybody on board. So I just want to then introduce our panel here. So we have several esteemed guests. So just immediately to my left, we have Katrin Sternfeldt-Jammeh, who's the mayor of Malmö and also part of the board of Greater Copenhagen. We have Linus Eriksson sitting right to her left, and he is responsible for the Øresund Bridge that many of you have had an opportunity to use in the last day or so. Then we have Anders Anlid, who you just heard from, and he's going to be able to speak to us with two different hats, his Board of Trade hat, but also the chairman of the Freedom of Movement Council hat, which we heard about earlier. We also have Helena Andersson, who is the vice chair of the Regional Council and chair of the Growth Committee for the region of Halland, and I encourage you all to look it up on your iPhones to see the geography of the region. And then we also have with us the airport, which many of you also used in the last couple of days, Søren Rosenkilde Clausen, head of public affairs for the airport. So huge welcome to the panel, and we'll start with a couple of rounds of questions for this part of the panel, and then we'll switch to bring in some of our international guests to see if they might have some ideas also for Greater Copenhagen, and for us to learn from them as well. So just to kick this off, Katrin Malmö, we are pleased to be here today. Thank you so much. Hopefully you get to see the beauty of the nature. I know here we're in sort of the cube, so afterwards, hopefully you'll be able to enjoy the wonderful nature. You're the third largest city in Sweden. You're our fastest growing large city, and you've had major transformations over the last few years, from shipyards to high-tech incubators, really a dynamic feel. Tell us a little bit about how cross-border collaboration has helped Malmö in contributing to its economic development and its transformation.
Thank you. First of all, I will just take the opportunities to say welcome to Malmö, of course. And then, as you said, we are a city that has transformed from an old shipyard industry to a more modern city. And in the beginning, or early on, we decided to focus very much on being in the very forefront and working with the green transition to create more job opportunities according to the green transition within the green industry. And that's something we share. It's an ambition we share with Copenhagen. So we work quite a lot already from the beginning together with Copenhagen. And then, of course, being part of a 4.2 million region gives us lots of opportunities for our citizens to seek amongst lots of different jobs, and also for all the business sector to they had a wider pool of talents and experience to recruit within. So it has been it's a great advantage to be part of a bigger region, of course, and also being part of a region with a very strong global airport. It's really important for us, and we can see a fast growth of new jobs, and we can see a faster growth actually in the private sector in Malmö than in both Stockholm and Gothenburg. And I would say that the labor market region, the size of it, and also our closeness to the airport is really key for us. It means that we see lots of new headquarters and lots of new business opportunities.
Great. So, I mean, in terms of the time that you've seen some of this this evolution, are there things you think residents could take better advantage of with this cross-border collaboration? You've seen business growth. You've attracted more residents, so you're fast growing, both in terms of population and in terms of attracting, as you mentioned, headquarters. What are your residents looking for out of this cross-border collaboration day to day?
I think we still could have more collaboration between our universities and research facilities, for example, and we struggle, as we heard before, we still struggle in your everyday life. If you're commuting, working in one side, living on the other, you're still struggling a little bit when it comes to security systems, when it comes to taxation, and we have some questions that we really have to release the full potential of the region, where we have to collaborate more with our national governments to make sure that we release the full potential and make it easier. But I really think that our citizens do take part of lots of things on the other side, and vice versa.
Great. Thank you so much, Katrin. Linus, we heard next year, 25th anniversary of the bridge. It makes a lot of these activities possible. And it's really what we would call game-changing infrastructure for the region. It's also got a lot of visibility for its design and innovations. And for those of you who are not familiar, it was the star of a TV show as well. So maybe, Linus, you can tell us a little bit, because I know the company, one of the visions of the company is really to make this the most attractive region to visit, live, and work in. So maybe tell us a little bit about how you view the role of the bridge in the region's economic development.
Yeah, thank you. It's actually before and after the bridge, actually. If you see on commuting, I think there were 800 people commuting before the bridge, and now we're closing up to 20,000 daily commuters. So, actually the first 10 years was a complete success. if you look upon how many people who moved to the other side, or how many people took a job on the other side, or get in love on the other side, it's like it was boosting. It was an exponential growth up to the year 2010. We have the financial crisis, and suddenly this development it faded out actually. So between 2010 and to the Corona, the pandemic years, we have almost no growth at all between the countries, even if it was a good period both in Denmark and in Sweden. But between the countries, it's faded, and it's faded out. So so it's a good story. I think you said Malmö is the fastest growing city in Sweden, and that won't happen without the bridge, I think. With this building, I think it should, without the bridge and this growth of region, we don't have this building, we don't have the turning torso, we don't have the Malmö University and the city tunnel as well. So it has had a big impact. But now we have the challenge to, can we take another step? And what does it take to get this region to give even better in the growth even more? That's what I focus on now, I think.
Yeah, so. And I mean, you see, so you want to kind of take it to the next level. Things kind of plateaued.
Yeah.
And then, we have also coming online the Fehmarnbelt, so this connection between Germany and Zealand and Denmark. Do you see that as another maybe game-changing infrastructure that could influence a bit the use of the bridge and the role it plays in the economic development of the region?
I think so. Yeah. Probably not for the commuting, because it's
very
quite distant. Yeah, it's quite distant. But if when it will be open in 2029, so it's within 5 years, and then when it's open from here where we sit right now, it will take 3 hours to Hamburg, and it takes 6 hours to Stockholm. So where are you going to take the next job? My grandchildren, where will they take their studies? When they choose university, I think that will be the perspective how the Northern Europe actually and the what do you say in English, in dense of the density in the Northern Europe will be getting a little bit more from Stockholm down to this region, to Copenhagen, and the airport will be even more important, since you can go from south to the airport and from north to the airport. So I think it will be game-changing. Today, 1/3 of all export and import goes via the bridge from Sweden, via Denmark to Germany and the European market. And I think that will be also be boosting even more, because it will be closer to the harbor of Hamburg and closer to Berlin. And so, looking really forward to it. It will be a game changer.
Great, great. And I think we'll also hear in a minute from the airport as well, because that's another one of the critical infrastructure here in the region. Helena, we heard a bit from Malmö, and I think we need to introduce people to also Region Halland. So you're a beautiful county on the coast. You're kind of nestled in between Gothenburg, the second largest city in Sweden, and Malmö, the third. And you're, part of this cross-border collaboration. You're part of Greater Copenhagen. Could you tell us a little bit about how this cross-border collaboration helps the residents of Holland, and the kinds of things that you try to do to make the most out of collaboration when you're maybe not in the sort of core urban part of the Greater Copenhagen?
Yes, thank you. Region Halland joined the Greater Copenhagen collaboration to ensure that Halland is an active participant in an intergovernmental partnership for welfare, growth, and sustainable development in the region. We are a small region in the west coast of Sweden, but we have many inhabitants. We are between, as you say, between Gothenburg and Malmö, but many of our inhabitants live in Halland, but work outside Halland. We have over 25,000 people going to Gothenburg every day from the north part of Halland. And with the collaboration with Greater Copenhagen, we also want to have better communications and better possibilities to go south and join the market in the greater Copenhagen area.
Great. So you've been looking north and you want to look a bit more south, yeah?
The people look
The
north,
people, yeah.
and we look on the both ways.
Okay.
But I say the infrastructure is very important, and also for us, Copenhagen Airport is a very important international and also local airport.
Great. And so the residents, do you think, if you say we're part of Greater Copenhagen, do residents in Holland understand what that means and how it could help them?
Yes, we have a work to do to discuss, but when we are preparing for infrastructure and preparing for the universities to collaborate, we look more in this area. And we also, when you have the Fehmarn Belt fixed link, it's important to know that it's going to change the structure in South Sweden and in Sweden at all.
Great. I think maybe I'll just go directly to you then, Sorensen. We just heard a couple times about the importance of the airport. Again, it's something that really helps with this global connections for the region. And we heard about the economic opportunities that brings. Tell us a little bit about what you see in terms of the trends in the airport and its use for trade and travel and its engagement in the regional economic development space.
Sure. First of all, I would take the opportunity to correct my colleague Linus, because you stated that it takes 6 hours to go to Stockholm and 3 hours to go to Hamburg. By car, yes. By my calculation, it's an hour and 15 minutes to Stockholm and 45 minutes to Hamburg. And that is what we deliver. We deliver connectivity and accessibility. And throughout the years, the decade from 2010 to 2019, we grew from 20 million passengers at the airport to 30 million passengers. Then we had a smaller downset with the coronavirus, but now we are back this year around 30 million. And with the growth announcement from SAS last week, we expect to go beyond 30 millions next year. And what does that provide the region? Well, it provides the region with accessibility for foreign students, for international labor, for international business. We are helping attracting international businesses to the region. And a strong collaboration between the border and over the Öresund Bridge is very important for us to be able to do so. I just visited Schiphol Airport yesterday in Amsterdam. They have a catchment area of 34 million people, and they have around 65 million passengers. We have a catchment area of 4.5 million people, and we have around 30 million passengers. So we really need to be effective and focused in order to attract the airlines to the region, in order to supply the different stakeholders with accessibility. That's a role that we take, of course, very seriously. Of course, we would like to grow from a company view, but it's even more important for us to deliver this international accessibility.
And as we heard from the interventions, that's one of the top points. So you're playing really a core role here. Anders, you have, in your current hat with the Swedish National Board of Trade, you're thinking about the positioning of Sweden and its activities in the sort of global economic space. Tell us a little bit about what you think of the economic opportunities that having this stronger cross-border collaboration here contributes for trade and global integration.
Well, the region in which we are having this meeting is, as we've heard, a very dynamic and successful one, and it's important for the promotion of both Swedish and Danish trade and investments, evidently. And I think looking at these border issues from a national point of view, And from the point of view of also this council in which I'm working, it is notoriously difficult to get national level, highest level politicians in the political level to focus properly on these issues. But the Greater Copenhagen region has succeeded in doing just that. Of course, it helps that Copenhagen is part of the cooperation. But I think that what Greater Copenhagen has done in terms of making sure that the political level, the business level, and civil society jointly put their interest on the agenda has been detrimental, has been necessary, for achieving the progress that has been achieved. And this tax agreement that we heard about is a good example of that. It was underway for years, I don't know how many years, 6, 7, 8 years, I think. And it wasn't until the region very firmly together, political parties left and right, and the business communities jointly said that now we need this. And then there happened to be a state visit by the Danish king to Stockholm, which also helped a bit to get it done. But I think that was part of the, that showed how much this kind of deep cooperation in a region can actually help. And I also think that the region has helped the government's focus on Greater Copenhagen, and we have this, I think, successful cooperation. The task force Öresund that was kind of formed a couple of years ago with the region and the two national governments, and that has also been very helpful. So this deep, determined, long-term cooperation in a region of this sort is, I think, a pattern for others to follow.
Great, and again, that's why we're bringing a lot of our international folks here, because we really think, of course, this is a region that people have their eye on and want to learn from, so absolutely. So I think we're doing great on time, so thank you so much. So I think we can go to our second round of questions, which is really focusing maybe a bit more on the labor market mobility issues, the sort of kind of daily commuting. If we go back to the airport, you employ a lot of people. So you're a major employer in the region, and one of the challenges we heard is that actually it's been hard to find people. There are labor shortages. As an employer, what are you seeing in terms of your ability to kind of find people and working from both sides of the border to help ensure that the growth that you're looking for and the very effective, I think you said, right, the 30 million for 4.5 million inhabitant region to sort of meet the growth expectations you have going forward?
Yes, we are measured in geography. We are the largest workplace in Denmark. Nearly 20,000 people works at the airport. And especially on the Danish side of the Øresund, we have labor shortages, both white and blue collar workers. And it is very important for us to have the accessibility of Swedish labor to the airport. 15% of the 20,000 people working at the airport are actually from Sweden. Most of them, of course, from the southern part of Sweden. So we are looking strategically, how can we attract Swedish labor to the airport, and not just offering them higher wages, but how can we make ourselves attractive, because otherwise shortages will lead to inefficiency, and of course the airlines are very keen on being able to have a stable environment in the airport. We must ensure that we are ready to accommodate growth in the future, and labor is one of our top 3 issues in order to do so.
Yeah, and how do you, are there any particular programs or strategies that you have to try and attract more workers to the airport?
Well, we participate in labor events here in Sweden in order to make ourselves known. I think it's also making the Swedish labor force aware that they actually have the opportunities in Denmark. And I mean, we're one train station away from Sweden. You can get here by 30 minutes. You'll be able to leave Malmö and be at the airport. So of course, efficient infrastructure is also important. And that's why we're also working with, alongside with the Öresund Bridge in exploring the opportunities to create mobility also for the labor force to the airport and for the rest of the city.
Yeah, and it's also very impressive, this short time distance. I live in the middle of Paris and commute to the OECD in Paris, and it still takes me more than 40 minutes door to door. So I could even, I could cross countries much quicker. So maybe going back to the bridge, Linus, you had mentioned, of course, around 20,000 daily commuters, or one of the other speakers, and you know, you mentioned some changes in terms of plateauing. I mean, just out of curiosity, you think, what is the capacity for more commuters? If we can make this easier, is there current excess capacity that you could take advantage of to boost commuting? And just out of curiosity, do you think teleworking has changed some of the commuting patterns, which could actually facilitate, because you would definitely have people being able to work on both sides of the border and maybe just not commuting 5 days a week, but commuting 3 days a week, for example?
Yeah, we see that the hybrid way of working. I think that's good for the region, because if you live on one side and work on the side, you don't have to go to work every day.
Yeah.
It makes it easier to have children and get a life together. So, so I think it's positive actually for the region, this hybrid. But what does it take to take the next level? And I think we have this task force. I think that's very important, where we see the industry and the organization in the Greater Copenhagen and the ministers that are responsibility for these Nordic issues, that we see each other and we see each other regularly is very important. And then we can have an agenda. We focus on the tax problems, or the getting a bank account, or just to have the trains in a punctual way between the countries. But to get this boost, I think we can't only focus on the problems, because that's not a story for my children to take a job if they only hear about the problems. We also need to build the good story, how good it is to live on boats, live on one side and work on the other side. And then you have the currency. Actually, if you take a job in Denmark, the same job as in Sweden, you get 50% more in salary for the same work. That's of course a driver, and we should use the driver. And also you have these opportunities to getting a large country, a large city that's Copenhagen, that sort of jobs that you can get there, and then you can go back and work in Sweden, and you can use your competence you get in Denmark in Sweden. So it's a win-win situation, I think. And if you see in the restaurants in Malmö, half of the customers are from Denmark actually. So this is a unique, within only some kilometers, you have this currency difference, and that's a driver. But we need to have solved the problems. And if you pick one, I would say, get the trains punctual. You said 30 minutes, but it's only 8 minutes from Hyllie to Copenhagen airport. So it's quite close. But then you need to trust that the train will arrive on time and go there on time. And we don't need the border controls actually. The border controls doesn't create trust actually. So
I was talking about the average travel time.
Yeah, that's right. So punctual trains, no border controls. I prefer control of border, but that's not the same that border controls, because border controls are more Eastern Europe, like 30 years ago. So we need to find ways that we build a trust and build a good story about the region. Then we will take the next level, and then we 30,000 commuters in some years, I hope.
Great, and there's capacity to do so?
The bridge itself, yes.
Yeah.
The bottlenecks is in the train system, but it's on the land sides, on both sides.
Okay, so it's the interconnections.
Yeah, and then we'll say the Danish are ahead of Sweden. They build right now, they increase the capacity of the airport station, and since they invest in the Fehmarn Belt, they also invest on the connection from Germany up to Copenhagen. So the bottleneck in the northern rail system, the Northern Europe rail system, will move north of the Öresund Bridge from Malmö up to Stockholm. So Sweden need to continue invest in infrastructure to get these bottlenecks away.
Okay, so Anders, you're not responsible for infrastructure, but you are thinking with your other hat from the Nordic Council of Ministers Freedom of Movement Council also about how to support this movement, and you talked a little bit earlier in your opening remarks. What are your reflections that you want to share, a bit more detail on what we could do here in Greater Copenhagen to facilitate that movement? And we've heard a few different interventions on what people think might help. What would you like to share from the council's work?
Well, I take the point that it is important not only to talk about the obstacles and barriers. We have to have a positive story to promote as well, of course. But our work is, to a large extent, kind of determined by issues that are seen as barriers. And when you interview commuters that work in one country and live in another, it is the tax problems, the social security related problems, and the pension problems that are the most kind of difficult ones for the individual. And therefore, as I said, we have concentrated on those issues. Remote work has created additional tax issues and difficulties. Now the new agreement seeks to overcome much of that, and that's positive. But this agreement is an agreement for Greater Copenhagen, for this region. It doesn't help border regions in the north of Sweden and between Norway, Sweden and Finland. So there's more to be done. And in this respect, since we have the OECD here, I think I would like to make one comment, and that is that we think in the Council that we have proposed a solution to this problem. We have commissioned a report that is there, a thorough report that provides solutions. But when we put that report on the table of the finance ministers in the Nordic countries, they refer to the ongoing OECD tax-related cooperation process, which is not rapid enough for us. We want to go faster than that. So maybe in that process it could be also discussed how to make it possible for regions to maybe go faster than what the entire OECD countries can come up with in that process. I don't know. And another part of this creating a positive narrative, and it's a reverse in a way, but I think we know too little about the costs of these barriers that we face. And again, since the OECD Secretariat is here, maybe able OECD economists could help us calculating the costs of not fixing these barriers. That I think would be giving us good arguments to continue to press for our tasks.
Great, thank you. So we heard a couple calls to action there that might help underpin policy with addressing some of these barriers in a way that maybe in some cases goes faster than the rest of the orchestra. And then I think this issue of in policy, generally, we focus on direct outlays, budgetary outlays, and perhaps not enough on the understanding these costs of inaction, which can actually be quite substantial, but you have to calculate and you have to show people in order to help make that happen. Let's turn now maybe back to Katrin and as Mayor of Malmö, and you mentioned a lot of the commuting across the border. You also have a lot of residents that maybe need a little extra support in order to integrate into the labor market, maybe help them get jobs at the airport, for example. In terms of workforce development and your activities on that space, what would you like to share that Malmö is doing in order to help its residents find these jobs across the border and share these good stories that we talked about, this positive narrative?
Well, I think we have lots of citizens that are really good ambassadors for working on the other side, and I think at the airport it's a really important place for a lot of our young people. It's their first job in many cases, and I think they are spreading the word as well. But even though we have had a high degree increase of growth, we have still a high unemployment rate. And we have a very young and diversified population. I think 40% of our population are younger than 29. It's kind of unique, and if you look at the Danish side, it doesn't really look like that. So we collaborate quite a lot with the Danish business sector, and Copenhagen and Malmö and Greater Copenhagen as an organization, we work with different kind of job fairs, for example, to make sure that we match our unemployed with business opportunities on the Danish side. One obstacle, which I see as a huge problem, is that we have lots of unemployed that are still not Swedish citizens and not European citizens, and they are forbidden to work on the Danish side, even if the business sector pinpoint them and say, we would like to hire you. So we still have some challenges with that. And we had some report done before saying that a fully integrated labor market where you don't have this kind of issues could create 6.8 billion more growth. So we really had to address all those difficulties to make sure that we release this full potential. I would like to add something else. I think the bridge it's really a game changer. The airport is a game changer. But we are working together with Copenhagen and with the support of Greater Copenhagen and I would say also with support from the Danish business sector especially. So we are working in the long run to also extend the labor market with a metro line. In Copenhagen, they are at the moment developing their commuting system with new metro lines, and we are planning together, and we have been supported from the European Union to investigate how we can create a metro line between our commuting system in Malmö and in Copenhagen. So you have access straight into the Copenhagen metro system, and that's kind of unique, and it's still just being planned, but we are working on it because then we could enlarge our labor market with another 1 million inhabitants, which also it would mean like 500,000 new jobs within an hour for our commuters. So that's something in the long run that we already are planning. As one way of meeting also the Fehmarnbelt fixed link, and in the long run that will create more transportation between the north and the south in Europe.
Great, wow, that's, and the demographics of the region are really, of Malmö are very, very interesting. So there'll be a real need to identify strategies to make sure that they have access to ample employment as quickly as possible and make that transition to the labor market. Helena, I guess maybe you're a little far for the subway, but I mean, I know you're, as you mentioned in your initial remarks, the importance of having people also start to think about these employment opportunities and looking south as well as north. Are there any special programs or activities that you're doing to help educate some of the potential workers about these new opportunities looking more into Greater Copenhagen?
In the municipalities in the south of Halland, we work to have bigger labor markets and look more for south. We work also with the communication, the train. Communication is very important, and train infrastructure, that you have 2 rails at least, so you can meet trains and have many trains going in the right time, because we have great difficulties with that now, because it's so many parts in that. You also have transportation for persons, but you also have transportations for goods on the same rail. So we work very much with that. In our region, we have a lower unemployment rate compared to the national average. So many people live in Halland and work as I say, otherwise, other places. And we have a goal for Halland, the best place to live. So we are working at that place even more, that you can live in Halland. We have good communications to south, to the north, and to the east. So they have good place to live there. And we want the young people to see the possibilities going in a bigger area to have both studies and work. And you talk about the new plans for Malmö, and we have also discussed another fixed link over between Helsingborg and Helsingør, because that is nearer for us than go near to Malmö, but we are discussing that.
Great. So a lot of the infrastructure can support the greater opportunities for the residents. Just out of curiosity, with teleworking and opportunities for people not have to commute necessarily daily, do you see that as an opportunity for the attractiveness of the region, for people to stay and live there and still have economic opportunities a bit farther away?
I think it's very important, and when we talk to people who've moved to our region, it's the first thing they say. It's easy to come to Copenhagen. It's easy to come to Gothenburg, and yes, we have a good place there.
Okay. Yep. And I see Anders wants to jump in on this.
Yeah. Just a piece of information. In my agency, we have a great colleague who lives in Holland and works for us in Stockholm, and it functions well as well.
Excellent, excellent. Great. Well, I think we now have an opportunity to do a question and answers with the audience, if I'm not mistaken. It's hard to see with the light here, but do we have folks with the microphones that can field questions from the audience to our panel? Are we all ready to go? Yeah? Okay. Great. So this is your opportunity. You've got some very important people here on the stage. Not your toughest questions, but if you do have some questions, I'm sure they'd be pleased to sort of jump in and their thoughts on. So anyone want to kick this off? Don't be shy.
While we're waiting, I can say.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a son. He's 24 years old. Mm-hmm. He's working at the airport, actually, at the hotel, and he's so satisfied. But he can work there. I'm a Swedish citizen, and since then he's a Swedish citizen. But as you mentioned, there's a lot of youngsters in Malmö who were parents born outside Europe, yep. And not the European Union. And they're not allowed to take a work. They get a work in the airport, in the hotel or somewhere. But when they ask the authorities, no, you're not allowed. So you live in the region, you have grown up in the region, you're fluent in Swedish, and but you're not allowed to work. You can work at the hotel in Malmö, but you can't work in a hotel in Copenhagen. We need to solve that, actually. It is a real problem, and it should be easier. So they are, especially for the young people, so I think that's important. So.
Yeah, and actually we have a study that the OECD is conducting with support also from the European Commission and with Greater Copenhagen, looking at the third country nationals, yeah. is the language that is that we refer to those folks who are born outside of Europe or who are resident here, and some of the administrative challenges that they're facing, but that if some of these barriers were resolved, could address a number of different important issues, both in meeting labor shortages and giving economic opportunity and integration for folks who are, just, they're by birth have a different passport. So, excellent. All right, just checking if we have any questions from the audience. I see some hands being raised on this side here. So somebody without lights in their eyes can maybe help identify the speakers. And great if you can just introduce who you are, where you're from, and your question to our panel. So.
Yeah, yes, hi, my name is Christine Ewan. I'm from Austria. I'd be interested to know how it works language-wise. I mean, I don't know how similar Swedish and Danish are, or English. What's the common language, and how does that work?
Great. So who wants to start on collaboration and communications on language? Sure, go ahead, Katrin.
I think for most people, it's quite easy to understand each other. You have some different dialects, but it's quite easy for most people. But I think it's a growing problem amongst our youth. They are using English in another way than we, my age and so, are doing. Actually, I grew up with Danish television, and it's not really the case any longer.
No.
So it's stronger amongst older people, share knowledge about the languages.
Yeah.
But it's lots of similarities, and it's quite easy to understand.
Yeah, I agree. It's a growing mental barrier, I think. We at Bridge, we have employed both from the Danish side and Swedish side, and we speak our own language. We don't speak English to each other. I speak Swedish and my colleagues speak Danish. So, and we'll take one mouth or two and then you understand each other. So, yeah, it's there somewhere. Especially it's very difficult to calculate in Danish. So we calculate in Swedish. But Danish krona, they are a better currency. But we need to address that. I asked my daughter, she's 21, and last year she decided to go to university. And she should I go to the business school in Stockholm or the business school in the United States? And I said, but it's a business school in the CBS in Copenhagen. It's quite popular and it's famous. And she immediately responds, oh, but I can't Danish.
I guess they speak English anyway.
Definitely. So, but it's not a mental barrier. So we need to have a new Netflix series where we have Danish talking, Swedish talking people. So like the Bridge.
Like the Bridge, exactly, exactly. And I think
but we have Danish classes in some of our schools as well.
And are there Swedish classes on the other side? I heard a no from the audience.
40 years ago since I went to school, so.
Okay, well, and this comes up, I know, in other... Yes, Helena.
Say something that if you go in the history, we have been Danish more than we have been Swedish in this part of Sweden. So many words are similar. So I think that's also easier when we have this history and tradition to see each other.
And does it ever come up, and we've heard this in other sort of cross-border areas, where there might be opportunities to teach more functional use of language as opposed to, the formal learning of a language that often involves literature and history, etc. But there are also opportunities to do more accelerated, practical, hands-on training in linguistic needs for particular jobs. I mean, does that come up, for example, at the Bridge or the airport, or within a month you understand each other and everything's good to go?
Certainly, but I've as the only Danish representative up here, if you take a walk down the main shopping street, Strøget in Copenhagen today, you will hear that 50% of the people are speaking English, and of course at the airport English is mandatory, but if you go to a restaurant as well in Copenhagen, 50% of the waiters will speak English to you. So we also see a general shift towards English-speaking labor force, and I think we have to adjust to that more than we have to adjust to learn Swedish or Danish. Sorry, but that's the way it goes.
Well, I know it's also important for, also identity and language and culture that we also preserve our languages. And being perhaps the native English speaker on the panel, I want to make sure English is not the not the only core language for everybody. Other questions that folks wanted to, and I think so. Those with the microphones can go to whoever is raising their hands. Since
Helen McGurk from Ireland. Sorry, I'm right up the back.
Okay, thanks.
Karen. You talk about the problems, whether it's commuting, language. From Ireland, housing is a huge problem, and particularly around local development. I'm curious does housing play a part in this cross-border? And yeah, I'd be curious. Thanks. A very interesting panel, by the way. Thank you.
Okay, so where it's cheaper on this side, right, to live? Yes.
Yes, it is. And a couple of years ago, we had, I would say, a crisis on the Danish side, and we saw lots of people moving from Copenhagen to the Swedish side. But I think it's not really the same movement right now, but we have been focusing quite a lot in Malmö to make sure that we have a growth with new buildings last couple of years. We're working quite a lot to make sure to be able to meet all our new residents, but we still haven't exchanged, but it looks a little bit different during different times due to the corona and the situation on the Danish side as well.
But there's advantage actually, because it's cheaper in Sweden due to corona, but also due to the market is different between the capital of Copenhagen and Malmö. And I bought my first villa for 1 million Swedish kronor in 2000. And 10 years later, it was worth 3 million. So because all the Danish people were moving over to Swedish side, it's very cheap. So the house pricing were actually boosting.
A villa for 1 million?
Yeah, it was
okay. That's good.
25 years ago. It was small one.
Sounds good. Congratulations.
Yeah. The deal it said was very beautiful, and then I bought it, and then I need to be lots of renovation. But so there's been a price impact on the Swedish side on house prices, but it's still a difference. So the combination, live in Sweden and work in Denmark, that's 95% of all the commuters go in that direction. Yeah. So it's quite unique actually.
Yeah, well, I mean, and these price differentials are one of the incentives that people from one side to the other.
And we should use it as a region. Yeah.
I think there were some other questions, so folks who are managing the mics, just go ahead and pass them on. And
hello, hi, I'm named Laura Marano from Norway. My question is a bit about your kind of definition of growth. I mean, you spoke a lot about the effect of COVID and the blips in numbers, but is there real incentive to challenge your definition of growth to include more inclusive ways of living, more sort of well-being and quality of life in terms of what's considered progress?
Oh, the big philosophical questions for you all. So let's see.
We are working really a lot with that. We have seen, as we started out by saying that we used to be an all-industrial city, we started to create new green jobs. We realized that we have a high degree of growth, but we are still struggling with high rates of unemployment, and we are really working hard to make sure that we have the success story more inclusive. So we are like trying to pinpoint to make sure that people without jobs are included in the movement today. So we are working hard with that. And the way of living, how to create a livable city, how to work to reduce the barriers between different neighborhoods, and so it's really high top on our agenda. And I think I meet lots of mayors from all over the world. I'm also president of a network of 2,600 cities and regions globally, and I think mayors all over in fast-growing cities, we look at the green transition, and we are really eager to be in the front line, lots of us, many of us, but we also work hard to make sure that the green transition is inclusive, because if we build our cities in a way and refurb and invest in energy efficient solutions in a way that means that people have to leave, I mean, then we're not able to do the job, and we're not able to reach nor the Paris Agreement or the SDGs, the UN sustainability goals. So if you have high ambitions to create a sustainable world, you have to work to be more inclusive than today.
Yeah, I agree. It's so easy that you focus on the hard facts. You calculate how many passengers or how many transports or how many cars or trains. but the purpose with the bridge, we said we build the bridge once, and we continue to build the bridges. Actually, and if you look upon the agreement between Sweden and Denmark governments when they, in 1991, when they agreed for build the bridge, the purpose, it says in the first paragraph, the purpose with the bridge is to create a common labor market and a cultural exchange between the countries. That's the purpose, and that's what we work for. Actually, that's why I'm here today. The most important, if we find this win-win, that's the culture on both sides. We learn from each other, and we get curious in each other. And actually, the Danish hygge, this common sense of having a good life in Denmark, that's very good for us as a Swede to learn. And in that way, we can give it something else back to the Danish people. The team building and the thinking in team ways that we good in Swedish, a consensus. That is very Swedish. And we can export that to our friends on the Danish side. So,
Helena, you wanted to jump in?
Yes, I think it's important to work with these issues when we work with sustainability, and on our part, we also see that are we going to join new employees to our part of we need technicians, we need people in healthcare and so on. You must have that dimension in and work with that.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, I mean, this is, of course, a priority in terms of inclusive growth at the OECD. We have champion mayors for inclusive growth. We have a lot of our work on well-being and measuring using statistics to sort of better quantify what are the different things that really matter for people and their quality of life. So, of course, that's an important part of this measurement agenda that we also have at the OECD. And then the great examples that we get from our different communities on the actions that they're taking, whether it's a more inclusive labor market, a more inclusive green transition. We heard, of course, in the opening, this is a great green sustainability hub, one of the top in terms of the share of the workforce that's green, in terms of green patenting, and of course, the different opportunities that can be created for folks across the spectrum in terms of background and skill levels, so that it is a sustainable and inclusive Greater Copenhagen. So I think we're at the time to sort of wrap up this panel. So maybe just, as they say in French, a mot de la fin, so the end, the sort of last words that each of you might want to say. So I think, you know, we've had really a great discussion on what each perspective had in terms of what are some of the things we need to take forward. But so this is really the last round on sort of the future agenda. Where should Greater Copenhagen be focusing some of its energy and efforts in order to make this the most vibrant, inclusive, and sustainable region? So I'll let folks jump in.
Well, from our point of view, reliability is essential. We saw during COVID that from time to time the bridge was more or less closed, and the reliability disappeared, and that did great harm to both the airport, of course, but to the region as such. Because if you don't have a reliable connection, people will hesitate to take advantage of that in the future. I mean, you will be hesitant to place your activities on the other side of the bridge. So please, let's learn from that experience and keep it open 24/7. Yeah, for as long as you are able to maintain the bridge, Linus. 100 years.
Great. Helena, do you want to jump in? Your priorities, you think, going forward?
I think the sustainable transports. How can we ensure that we can meet the increased mobility and use the potential that comes with the opening of the Fehmarn Belt? Because we think it's a great challenge on the Swedish side, to meet that. And we don't want everything on trucks. We need to have it on train and on boat and so on.
Great, thank you. Anders, We heard a call for some tax issues. We heard a call for measuring the costs of inaction. Anything else you want to add as we look forward?
Well, continuing on that line, maybe making sure that we create cross-border statistics more viable, more reliable, and collect them better. A lot is done, including in this region. The Greater region, Copenhagen region has done a lot. But I think, generally speaking, this is an important issue if we are going to make border-related policies evidence-based again, as we should, in order to overcome the costs that we pay for not integrating us properly today.
Great. Yeah, and that's always the tough one on the statistics side, and I think maybe we'll be able to get into it in the next panel as well on what some other places are doing to do statistics. And if I'm not mistaken, a number of years ago, there was actually an Orison index that looked at different elements of integration, including culture and things like that. So excellent. Linus, anything else you wanted to jump in?
I agree with my colleagues, but if you need to add something, and I focus on the story, the good story,
stories,
and the vision, because the bridge in 1991 was a vision, and then we built the bridge and we created a region. But what is the next step? What is the next step for this region, and what is the political vision? Next year is the 25th anniversary. I hope we will have the kings here. I hope we will have the prime ministers here on both sides. And it would be nice to hear the prime minister talk about how would we act together as neighbors and as a region, and what is the vision that we can stick to and talk about and put this positive energy that we had when the bridge was new.
Great, great.
Good story.
Good story. And then, of course, for those of you, just a reminder, there is the visit to the bridge as one of the site visits later on this afternoon.
This afternoon, hundreds of you. So you're welcome. Yeah.
Great. Katrin?
Well, I agree with all of my colleagues here on stage. I wish for a little bit less competition between our capital city, Stockholm, and Copenhagen. And I wish our governments to sit down and actually work closely together to make sure that they make the most out of the region around Stockholm and the region here. It's not a competition between the airport in Stockholm and the airport in Denmark. It's obvious for me that we have to work harder to make sure that we make the most of all our regions. We can make a bigger, we could deliver more if we also have a stronger recognition from our governments to collaborate instead of competing.
Okay, excellent. So I think we've taken notes, I think, for Greater Copenhagen and its platform. And so join me, please, in giving a round of applause to our panelists. Great, thank you so much. And so we're going to let you safely exit the stage. This stairs on the side, and then we're just going to take 1 or 2 minutes to help our other colleagues that are coming from other places to give some examples for cross-border collaboration. So.